and we may kill their conversation by doing it. I don't know what that means. That is actually not that obvious to talk clarity and become a reason why the person you're speaking to may stop paying attention while listening. Let me leave you with some of the changes I've made. These were the 3 habits that I thought were impacting my communication the most. My friends, I've been thinking a lot about communication lately, mainly because I'm seeing a lot of not so good communication happen a lot of the time. We have something that can only be described as an attention crisis at the moment, and if we do not communicate well, we will most likely not be able to get our points across because attention will be lost along the way. We don't really get the benefit of being taught the best way to communicate. We tend to just figure it out by ourselves. A lot of the time, we just do what we've always done, and maybe get a little annoyed if it doesn't land. Other times, when the stakes are high, we may try something different to see if it works, but there isn't a handbook we can go and get somewhere in our homes to get communications right the first time, every time. A lot of the time, we don't see the fact that we may not be communicating our points in the right manner. We really just see the results. With your partner, for instance, your choice of words may cause an argument. When this happens, we don't always think back at what we said. We just remember what they said in response before the argument started. Same thing goes with our friends. We see the result of what was said or not said in where the friendship goes thereafter. Talking about friendship, I hope you've seen our last video where I talk about some of my thoughts on why it gets harder to maintain friendships as we get older. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. My name is Bobby, and this is Real People, Real Talk. Let me start off by saying I'm not an expert, just a real communicator in the real world trying to improve the way I articulate myself and put my points across. I am figuring it out as I go, and I'm sharing my thoughts and opinions in the hope that it will be thought-provoking for others too. I've been working on my own communications for a number of years now, and I still get it wrong today. However, since I've become aware of my own communication, it allows me to reflect back on the conversation and learn from the mistakes to be better the next time. It also means that I've become a lot more aware of other people's and their communication, and it gives me another opportunity to learn. I want to share some of those learns with you, talk about the changes I've made, and highlight how these changes have made me a better communicator and allowed me to get better outcomes overall. Let's have a look at some of the things I wanted to change, the things I believe were impacting mine and others' ability to communicate effectively. The first thing was filler words and filler sounds. This is where we say or hear people say, like, you know, just, or I mean, and when overused may also include at the end of the day, basically, actually, literally, and obviously. The list goes on. If we were to look at one of our conversations and a word is being said at a high volume of times, then it may be that we're using it as a filler word. Same goes for the filler sounds, the ums and the ahs. I would also put so into the filler sounds category, because I feel we have started to use so as a sound rather than the word that it is. There was a time where I was starting every one of my responses to people with so, and I inserted so within sentences to a point where it really shouldn't have made sense. It was only when my daughter started to do it that I realized it was slightly distracting when trying to listen to her point. Then I also heard a lot of the English-speaking world doing it and became more aware of having to change that habit. Next thing I thought about was when I was speaking within a conversation. In one of my previous videos, I spoke about the Me Too responses. This is where someone may tell us they are looking forward to their holiday in the Maldives. And we respond with, oh yeah, the Maldives. I went there in 2009. It was fantastic. We stayed in an oceanside villa, and it was truly the best holiday ever. Me Too responses have the ability to take the momentum out of what your conversation partner is saying, and we may kill their conversation by doing it. Well, this also applies to timing. Sometimes we think it's our turn after our friends and family have said their first sentence, and by doing so, we stop them from continuing, and this then sends a signal of it no longer being a conversation between two parties, but an opportunity for us to just say what we want to. Let's remember, they were the ones that brought it up in the first place. And if they hadn't, we may never have spoken about the Maldives. I also looked at the vocabulary I was using. When reading or listening to others speak, we may see or hear new words that sound great. For instance, I love axiomatic, which means self-evident or unquestionable. When using words like this with others, we are most likely going to get a break in the conversation where the other person has to ask, what does that mean? If I did that a few times in the conversation, it would start to make me feel like I'm creating a scenario where the other person may think that they're supposed to know these words too. Think about this for an example. You have a cough and some shortness of breath, and you go to the doctor. If he or she says you have a slight respiratory tract infection, and you had never heard that term, you may be more worried than when they told you it was a slight chest infection. It's these 3 habits that I wanted to look at closely, make changes, and see whether they would help me to be a better communicator. I measured my success by observing 2 things. The first was whether or not it felt like people listened attentively, and the second was whether people were confident enough to continue to share what they wanted to. I wanted to make sure I did everything in my power to allow my friends and family to say the things they wanted. Let me go into some more detail for you. If you are starting to look at how you communicate and feel like there are some other key factors that you have identified, please let me know in the comments. It will be helpful for me and others that may be watching this video, and I always appreciate reading your thoughts. Right, filler words and sounds. Personally, I think these are distracting. They stop us from coming across with clarity and become a reason why the person you're speaking to may stop paying attention while listening. Filler words in particular can be off-putting, especially because we tend to use these words out of context. You may hear someone use obviously a lot when speaking. They may say something like, obviously I have a bicycle to help me commute. Well, that is actually not that obvious at all. But because that person has become so familiar to overusing obviously as a filler word, we would be left thinking, should I have known that already? Did I forget about the time when they told me they always use their bike to get to work? It's the same for words like basically, literally, and actually. When using filler words like these, the person you're speaking to may just become really aware of repeatedly hearing them rather than listening to the message we are trying to deliver. Filler sounds are similar. If we use ums and ahs between our words when we are talking, it pauses the momentum of our speech. It tends to remove the impact your words have. Something I hear very often is using like and so throughout communication, but especially when starting sentences. As I said before, I went through a stage where I was using so to start all of my responses, and when I became aware of it, I knew I had to change it. So is a great word that should be used as a segue to move on to a follow-up after making a previous point. Removing filler words and sounds from your speech will make you immediately sound more articulate, in my opinion, and therefore it is a worthwhile effort to make. Now let's look at this idea of when we speak within a conversation. The point here was to allow my conversation partner to actually get into the thing they wanted to talk about and let them go without interruptions so their thoughts could develop. This was really hard at the beginning because, like most people, I felt like I needed to respond as soon as they'd paused or stopped talking. One way to respond was to bring it back to me and try and share something along the same subject matter from my view. But this meant I was bringing their conversation back to me, changing the roles and essentially forcing them to listen to me now when it was them who needed to talk in the first place. It made me consider whether this has maybe become a social norm or whether it was about comfort. Is it less uncomfortable to have no quiet parts during a conversation? Or is it that it's expected for us to respond and retort to everything someone says? What can we really do in those scenarios? Well, we always try and find common ground. If someone brings up the fact they went to the Formula One and it was a great experience, but we don't have much knowledge of this, we may just end up saying something like, I recently watched the F1 movie with Brad Pitt. Did you see it? You should watch it, especially if you like Formula One. What we have inadvertently done is change the trajectory of the conversation before our conversation partner had the opportunity to completely share their experience. Tell the stories of how their emotional state changed during that experience, how the experience may have inspired them, or even what they have learned. That person may now leave that conversation thinking, that all that was talked about was our side rather than theirs. How about the vocabulary we use? This was actually a recent change for me. I realized that the only person that thought it was cool that I was using big or complex words was me. There was a moment where I spoke to someone and said, "Is everything okay? You look a little lethargic." To which they responded with, "I don't know what that means." I had to then say, "I mean, you seem tired, and as if you don't have much energy." I started to think that clarity in communication was making sure anyone could understand you, and the best way of doing that was to use simple and clear language. At some point, I felt more intelligent in being able to use bigger, more complex words. But I now believe intelligence is being able to understand all these words, but still use simple ones to get your point across. Think about it. If we are delivering a message to a room, for instance, the best way to make the most impact is by ensuring there is no follow-up questions of what we meant. The same goes for slang. Very similar to big or complex words. Using slang may feel cool and trendy, but if we are using slang words that others don't understand and we find ourselves having to explain the word, then is it really clear communication? These were the 3 habits that I thought were impacting my communication the most. If any of this sounds familiar or is thought-provoking for you too, then please like this video to let me know. And if there's something you would like to add, or if you want to mention anything at all, please leave a comment now. I would love to hear your thoughts on this important subject. Let me leave you with some of the changes I've made, which have already proven to be successful in making me feel as though I'm communicating better. Number 1, replacing filler words and sounds with a simple pause. Rather than feeling like I have to speak continuously and therefore use filler sounds or words to allow my brain to catch up, I take a pause instead. The pause allows me to suppress the need for a comforting filler, and I stay away from the distracting ums and ahs. This is a big mindset shift for sure, and there is challenges along the way, such as someone trying to finish your sentences. However, with a little time, people will learn to just listen when you speak, especially because we are now coming across much clearer, with intentional words that are all meant to be there. The longer the pause, the more meaningful the message becomes. If you normally start a sentence with "so" or "like," then take the pause at the start. Nobody said a question had to be answered within 3 seconds. Take a moment to think about what we are going to say, and then what we do say will be impactful. Number 2, when thinking about when I speak in a conversation, the change I made is to embrace silence. When my conversation partner is speaking, I stay silent and I listen. I put the effort into really listening and even making mental notes. I'm not formulating my response in my head, nor am I thinking about what the solution may be if it is a problem that they're describing. By staying silent, I allow them to talk to their heart's content. I have done this for a while now. The result? The other party just talks, going into more and more detail and really feeling like they got to share completely. While this is happening, my mind is almost clear, just taking it in, letting key points linger, which then help me to ask more questions to understand further. Sometimes this happens during a phone conversations, and some of my friends may say, "Are you still there?" This is because they're so unfamiliar with the idea of talking without interruption. I then get to say, "Yes, of course I am. I'm just listening." And that feels like a huge success. All right, I know what you're thinking. So far, this guy is telling us the way he became a better communicator was to talk less. Yes, you're right. It sounds odd, but this is the move. Taking a moment and pausing will eliminate your filler words and sounds. Staying silent and listening with a clearer mind will allow you to send signals to your conversation partner to continue to talk. In return, you will have more information to respond to, and that conversation will be one of the best you had. On top of that, you are also showing your friends and family what a good conversation looks like. Thinking before talking and deciding when the best time is also means you can formulate your points better. The loudest person in the room is generally the most uncomfortable. By being intentional with our words and patient with delivery, we create a brand that says, "You may want to listen when I speak." Speak like a solar eclipse. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it is special. Let me give you number 3, vocabulary and slang. Well, it was a simple fix. I stopped using the words that some wouldn't understand straight away. I still see and hear new words. I still think they're cool. Still look at the dictionary when I hear something to see what it means. And I still learn. But I use them to understand better rather than use them to speak. If someone uses a new word, I learn it and I'm in a better position to respond, but I will refrain from using it. Slang works the same. As I'm getting older, I have less desire or need to use slang too much. However, if my conversation partner does, I can still understand and respond in my own way. With vocabulary and slang, there is a caveat. There are some words we use that make us us, the quirkiness we have in our personality that our friends and family love and enjoy. There is no need to change this with them, but you may end up code switching depending on where your communication is needed. Talking so that everyone can understand is the number one hack to coming across clearly and articulate. Nowadays, you won't hear me say axiomatic, even though it's a great word. However, as someone said it, I'm glad I know what it means. Lastly, I started to reflect on conversations I've had, thought about things I said or maybe not said, and how this affected the conversation as a whole. Did I listen attentively or did I miss some things? Did I say something that stopped the conversation in its tracks? Did I use too many filler sounds and affect the attention of my conversation partner? Did I pause enough, use words effectively, or did I end up over-talking? The simple habit of reflecting allows me to think back and identify improvements, allow me to make changes and learn to articulate better next time. This is a habit that we can adopt in all aspects of life. Your own debrief or review to take your self-improvement to the next level. There you have it. 3 habits I wanted to fix and the 3 things I did to change them, plus an extra action for continuous improvement. I hope you found some of the stuff in this video useful. If you did, or if it gave you something to think about, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. Not only is it the number one way you can support us, but it's also an indication that I'm on the right track with the content that I'm bringing to you. Thank you for watching and for your support so far. I really appreciate it. Please share the video with anyone you think might benefit too. My name is Bobby, and this is Real People, Real Talk. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again soon. If we use or between our words when we are taking it, and I stay away from the distracting or. How do you say and or?